What is up, YouTubers? Joe Rogan's conversation with Gary Johnson. The first 15 minutes, you should listen to it, but it is useless for all practical purposes because they spend a lot of time discussing labels, the label libertarian, and they never successfully arrive at a suitable definition. I agree, of course, and who couldn't agree at 22 minutes and 37 seconds in, that this whole business of how you get on the stage in the presidential debates is a bit of a mess, and it's certainly corrupt. So, and here I need to go back and check and see who said what, but I believe that Gary Johnson said this. He said, ideally, you would be able to donate to exactly where you would want that money spent. And that's a huge problem for all of us. Rather than going on a long rant, I'll just stick to that interview. And I think somebody in there said, ideally, you would be able to donate to exactly where you would want that money spent. Think about the implications of that, and do you believe that the implications of that are desirable? I'm not sure if it is desirable. Well, I know it's not desirable. I know that the system, there could be no system if that were the way the system were run. If we limited assistance to those in need to only those choices made by those who possess money, then we would have outcomes that are far worse than the outcomes that could be arrived at otherwise through taxation and the fancy word, of course, equalization, right? Not a fan of equalization, right? There's just so many things to say here that I'm not going to say. At 32:38, this is where it gets troublesome and why Johnson and, healthcare and Medicare devolved to the states underneath Johnson's view. And that is a common libertarian view, that healthcare would devolve to the states. The big question that we're facing over and over again in so many different guises is the question of our association to each other as citizens of the same country. Our association with each other just by virtue of the fact that we are both citizens of this country and not that country. And many disagreements can be phrased in such a way that those parties disagreeing are actually disagreeing about how deep their associations should go. Paul Wellstone said, we all do better when we all do better. Once again, not to use slavery as a rhetorical football, but the question I asked in pink immediately below that at the note 32:38 in the conversation was, what happened when we left race relations to the states? At 34:25, and as we're continuing in, as Johnson is getting his sound bites on TV, this is where he's really losing it, is to hear him say on national television, X-rays are us, right? Oh, good heavens to Betsy Lee. Couldn't believe that. No insurance for ongoing medical need. I mean, and then insurance for catastrophic injury. This can be seen as a question of, well, yeah, we're both United States citizens, but I don't want to pay for your health care or whatever. Later on in the conversation, somewhere in there, he talks about how he was able to move everybody who was in a certain population on and give them the same health care that he was getting as the governor. I'm not sure where that went, but boy, isn't that an argument for a single payer healthcare system right out of his mouth? And what's happening in the conversation and what happens in the political debate today is they throw around the term free market, and it's just a Band-Aid bumper sticker that you put over the scratch that's on your car. I guess that'd be a good way to look at it, bumper sticker, right? You get a scratch on your bumper, so you buy some bumper sticker to cover that up. So when you hear people talking about free markets, you need to be aware that, just need to be wary. Interesting that about 46 minutes into the conversation, he mentions private prisons, and he talks about how Wackenhut was allowed into New Mexico, and the numbers were, say, $100 versus $66. And there's a lot to be said there, because every efficient allocation of scarce resources, which is what an economic question is, let's say, provisionally, it can be seen as an equation. And so what's on the other side of that equation? When the prison's duty, the prison's job as an organization, its duty is to house criminals in such a way that their constitutional rights are protected. So when Wackenhut is delivering goods to the state at 66 to every 100, then that means on the other side of that equation is the non-monetary protection of a prisoner's civil rights, or constitutional rights, whatever you want to say. Constitutional rights. And then, of course, later on, that particular government agency said no more federal prisons, or no more private federal prisons, and the stock dropped. And, of course, Johnson has not been on the television long enough to address that issue. I haven't seen him show up like on any TV shows or anything. He hasn't anything to say. They haven't been giving him the time. Yes, I just found it. It was in at 29:20. Johnson said that he received a health insurance policy, and you had all of the public assistance people in the state were able to get his health insurance, and that this was a success financially for the state. When you included all of the attendant costs of having citizens associated by virtue of the fact that they are citizens, having people associated by virtue of the fact that they are citizens, then when you run a single-payer healthcare system, you save money. You save time, you save effort, you save money because there are other things that are going on in a city or in a community that when you provide a single health payer system, costs of those things go down, so that when you're talking about a city council meeting, sitting around looking at budgets and boxes on a spreadsheet, it really does matter. These boxes on spreadsheets that these city council people look at, they, on the side of those equations, are real lives. So health devolves to the states. Troublesome part of the conversation, troublesome part of it. And I don't know if it's true. I should internet search it, but is it the case that one of his largest, or if not his largest, donor is the Koch brothers? You know, and I love that R is split I just made. R is, right? Because that's a whole other issue. R is, are the Koch brothers, is the Koch brothers. We don't even know what existential predication we should use, because, you know, are they one or two? Perfect bad news example. 11 cents from the feds, 15 cents worth of strings attached. This is something that Johnson will say over and over again, and that's cool, but it depends on the accounting. And if there's one thing that we know, is that the accounting is bad up and down all around. How the numbers are getting attached to things is not in any way, no one knows what it is. But going forward, it has to be a recognition by those on the right that our obligations to each other go deeper by virtue of the fact that we are each citizens of the United States of America, and we are thus associated through that citizenship with each other. That those connections between each other, even for libertarian, run deeper than many would like us to believe. That you can, as a libertarian, contrary to what the libertarian candidate for president says, that you can have a single payer system, and that you should have a single payer system, and that you can rationally have a single payer system using libertarian grounds, thinking in terms of logic and stuff, thinking about it as trying to be as logical and as cool as possible about things. And if you're a libertarian, you can make a very good argument that single payer is the best way. And the reason why it's justified is because we do have connections with our fellow United States citizens. And going forward, we're going to have to see and recognize that those connections with each citizen require more of us. Not in terms of aggregate income and outgo and all this business, It's not like your taxes have to go up. It's just that we have to move money from where it's going now to where it's going to put it elsewhere. We can do it. It can get done. On the news today, what are they doing? They're tying Zika to the Planned Parenthood, right? And so you can't let it devolve to the states and obviously the federal thing. But then, of course, you've got the overlay of the political parties on top of that. And sometimes letting the power devolve to states is a good thing on some issues. But if we can agree on how extensive our connections are to our fellow United States citizens, if we can get that cleared up in some way, or at least get it on the table as a discussion, that if you provide more help for cleaning people up on drugs and stuff, and if you can decrease the number of addicts, it might lead to less crime, which is going to lead to other costs that are currently being paid dropping. And the things are just endless. Continuing in the same vein, I was having a discussion once with a dude who is a dude. And he looked like a predator. He was like wetting his lips like a predator ready to strike a wounded animal. And what caused him to have this look in his eyes was me discussing with him the legalization of marijuana and the new revenue streams available to government. And I was telling him the idea that I read somewhere else. I don't know where, but I read the idea somewhere else. And then Los Angeles instituted that policy proposal where they said, okay, let's take the monies that are earned from marijuana legalization and let's put them directly to use in helping homelessness, as a general condition in Los Angeles. Because the income derived by the state from the taxation of marijuana represents an entirely new income stream. You can provide all of the services that you are providing for, plus take care of this huge problem that everyone has a problem with. No one likes seeing it. Everybody wants a solution. And you can take this revenue stream that's going to be coming in year over year over year, and it's going to be increasing year over year over year, and you can probably eradicate the problem while still providing every single service that you are currently providing. If not, be able to increase those other basic services. You can do it all. And you don't have to change anything. The only thing you have to do is not spend the pot money on anything other than fixing homelessness. And he was like, yeah, but get looking at, and when he said, it was like, it wasn't they, it's like, this guy I was talking to. But that's a good example of an economic analysis where you say, okay, that's classical economic theory. I mean, if you go back and read the basic economics text, or if you try to read all of the whatevers, everybody's going to agree that that's a case of economic rent that can be utilized to run the services of government in a way that doesn't cost anybody anything. And you can do that over and over and over again with so many problems without it costing anybody a damn thing. And the reason why we can do it is because we are associated with each other as citizens in one country. Each individual states, right? I view it as two associations. You're associated with state, and you're also associated with the federal. But you don't live in the federal, so you got to make sure your ass is covered on the state. You got to be, if you're going to run around in the deep south for, advocating for civil rights,